Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Sounds Like Sam. I'm your host Sam. Thanks for tuning in. This episode I'm going to be going over week 3 waiver wire ads for your fantasy football teams. And then I'm also going to be going over guys to drop if you have them on your team. They're guys I would definitely look to remove from your rosters and are definitely safe bets not to really perform much in the future. So without further ado, let's go over the week 3 waiver wire ads. Now, starting off is a player I already talked about last week, Daniel Jones of the Indianapolis Colts. Right now, he's currently rostered in only 21.2% of leagues, and he is currently the quarterback 2 in a lot of fantasy leagues. And for good reason, he's already rushed in 3 rushing touchdowns for the season, which is a pretty solid turnout and is a good thing to see. I really like the running quarterbacks who run in the touchdowns because it just obviously means they're getting more points added to their fantasy performances. So I like to see rushing touchdowns. I like to see that they're utilizing him and that he's making space for himself and finding ways into the end zone. But he's also helping the team win. He's looked really good for the Colts. He just played a really tough defense in the Denver Broncos, and he honestly played a really great game. His performance includes 316 yards through the air, 1 passing touchdown, where he had 6 carries for 2 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. So not as good of a performance as week 1, but the fact that he's only rostered in 21.2% of leagues right now, that means there's 79.8% of fantasy leagues that do not have the quarterback 2 in fantasy football right now. So you need to go immediately at him right now if your backup is basically anybody else. He should be added in all leagues. And I think he's going to continue on this run as well. The next guy I have is quarterback Mac Jones of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I know Brock Purdy is injured. When he comes back, probably take over the reins just because he's a $50 million man getting paid $50 million a year to quarterback the 49ers. Plus, he's just a solid quarterback, both in the NFL and fantasy wise. But in the meantime, if you aren't able to get Daniel Jones and you still need a quarterback when Brock Purdy is injured and on your roster, Mac Jones looks like a great substitution for you. He was able to throw 279 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have a fumble, but no interceptions. So he played a really good game, and he is going against a tough Arizona Cardinals defense. But with the way that the Panthers played against them in the second half and the way that Mac Jones played versus the New Orleans Saints, I have a good feeling that he's going to turn out a solid performance. I really like him if you're needing a quarterback, but I really would think that if you can get Daniel Jones, probably get Daniel Jones first. But Mac Jones is a solid backup for Brock Purdy if you need him. Next, I have Blake Corum, running back for the Los Angeles Rams. He had a really solid performance this weekend versus the Tennessee Titans. He rushed for 5 carries, 44 yards, and 1 touchdown. His touchdown drive was a really good one. He does struggle to get the opportunities because Kyron Williams is back there taking the full load, but Kyron was struggling a little bit, and when Blake Corum was in, he was looking pretty good. He ended up averaging 8.8 yards a carry in this game versus the Titans. And I think if you have Kyron Williams, you almost have to go ahead and take Blake Corum just in case because you never know. So I really like him as an ad this week and going forward. He's only rostered in 5.3% of leagues, but I really feel like he's just a backup option and a guy that you want on your bench just in case. So yeah, I like him as an ad. Next, I have Baishu Tutin, Jaguars running back. They just gave away and traded Tank Bigsby to the Philadelphia Eagles this past week. So, and Bashal Tutin really took control of his opportunities. He ended up having 8 carries for 42 yards and 2 receptions for 32 yards and a touchdown. So making the most of his opportunities, and he had a decent fantasy performance. He does still have to compete with Travis Etienne, who is the clear running back 1 for the Jaguars, but as a running back two and a bench player to stash on your team, I think he's a pretty solid pick as a waiver wire candidate this week and moving forward, especially if you have Travis Etienne. He looked like he was making the most of his opportunities at 5.3 average yard per carry, but to be involved in the passing game and do well is definitely a great consideration. He's rostered right now in 40% of leagues. So I think if you have Travis Etienne and you're in a deep league, you gotta be picking up Tootin right now. Next on the list is gonna be wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson. He had a spectacular game, and honestly, all the New York Giants receivers had a great game. He had 142 yards receiving on 8 receptions and 10 targets, brought in 1 touchdown, ended up with 24.2 fantasy points for a half point PPR league, which is pretty solid. He's right now ranked as the eighth wide receiver in half point PPR leagues. And I know that's based off of a ginormous performance of Russell Wilson, who, a quick note on him, is now the seventh quarterback on the waiver wire and ranked right now because of his performance versus Dallas. But Wan'Dale Robinson needs to be owned in all fantasy leagues. Having 2 straight weeks with 8+ targets and then being able to take in at least 6 targets for both games is a really solid performance. And I think he's a great player to add for your bench or flex play this season. If he's available, which it looks like he's available in 29.9% of fantasy leagues, you got to take him, and you got to take him right now. So I really like him as a pick. You got to go get him right now. DeAndre Hopkins is having a resurgence here as well. He's the newest Baltimore Raven this offseason, and he has 2 games with 2 straight touchdowns. So 2 touchdowns on the season. He doesn't receive a lot, but he has been getting it done on the yardage end. First game, he had 35 yards and a touchdown. Second game versus Cleveland, 2 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. Definitely better candidate for standard leagues, but I really like that they're getting him involved. He is a red zone target, and I think just for standard fantasy wise, that's a really good thing to have, especially if you're looking for a flex player. I really like DeAndre Hopkins, and it's good to see him back on the board as a top 15 wide receiver again. So just has to keep up the production off of what he's been getting, but hopefully he can get more involved too. Next I have on my list is Troy Franklin of the Denver Broncos. He's currently only rostered in 2% of ESPN fantasy leagues, and in half point PPR leagues, he's the 12th ranked player right now, and that's mostly thanks to his week 2 performance, having going 8 receptions on 9 targets for 89 yards and a touchdown. First week, he had 4 receptions for 44 yards on 6 targets, so he's definitely climbing up the ladder a little bit. I think versus the tougher defenses, when they're not able to get Sutton as involved as they'd like, Franklin with his Oregon connection of Bo Nix is going to be a solid option. I like him maybe as a flex play, but honestly, probably just keeping him and stashing him on the bench to see how he does. But I do think he should be rostered in more than 2% of ESPN leagues. So I like him as a pickup option if in a deep league. Tight ends. I'm going with Zach Ertz. I already listed him in my week 1 waiver wire pickups, but he's only rostered in 49.9% of fantasy leagues, and I think he has a great connection with Jaden Daniels. That's only been improving. The second half of the game, he ended up balling out, and Jaden Daniels really leaned on him in the second half. So I think he's a great tight end, especially in standard leagues. It's great to see him have 2 touchdowns to start off the season, and his week 2 performance was even better than his week 1, where he had 6 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. So on 8 targets. So I like to see that he's getting involved again. Kind of a throwback player like DeAndre Hopkins. So good to see him getting back into it, but he's a solid tight end option. Right now, he's ranked second in half point PPR leagues. So take note of him for sure, especially if you need a tight end. Juwan Johnson is another tight end I really have been liking. He's currently the third tight end in half-point PPR leagues. He had his first touchdown of the year this week and grabbing 5 receptions off of 9 targets for 49 yards. So he's definitely getting targeted a lot. 20 targets in his first 2 games total, 11 in the first week, 9 in the second. Those are really great target numbers. Great to see him getting involved. He's another great tight end option if you're looking for one. I could see this moving and staying the same just because their offense in New Orleans is kind of still a question mark, and I feel like they're still kind of finding themselves. So it's nice to see him getting involved and getting a lot of opportunities in this offense. So I like him as a tight end option. All right, defense is Falcons defense. They're playing the Carolina Panthers, so I feel like this is definitely a great option. They're currently the defense one as they had a great performance in week 2 versus the Vikings, and they really balled out, had 2 interceptions, 2 fumble returns, 6 sacks. I think they could have a pretty similar game versus the Carolina Panthers, and they're only rostered in 1.2% of ESPN leagues. Green Bay Packers are another defense I really like. They're only rostered in 44.8% of leagues and are the 5th defense in fantasy right now. They didn't have a great week 2 performance, but for a Thursday night game, I thought they did pretty solid. They're facing the Cleveland Browns, who really have been struggling on offense. I can see them having a really solid game against them. I like the Green Bay Packers for next week and moving forward, just as a defense overall. Kickers, Spencer Schrader of the Indianapolis Colts is a kicker I actually grabbed for 2 of my teams last week. Kind of didn't even notice him till after I put out my waiver wire ads list, but he's currently the number 2 kicker behind Dan Aubrey, and he's been showing out as of now. He had 19.1 fantasy points, hit he had 5, what are they called, field goals, and 2 extra points in this last game, and had 4 field goals and 3 extra points in his first game, so he's definitely being utilized a lot in the Colts offense. They're scoring a lot of points, and that usually equates pretty well to kickers in fantasy. The only problem that I've seen with him is he hasn't made any 50 plus yarders, which could be a problem in the future, but right now he's just killing it where he is and doing his thing. So as long as he keeps up the production and the Colts keep scoring, I really like him as an option. And he's only owned in 3.1% of leagues, and he's currently the number 2 kicker in fantasy. So I really like him. And then last guy if you need him to add, is Matt Prater of the Buffalo Bills. He's currently filling in for injured Tyler Bass. He should only be probably in another week or 2, but until Bass returns, he's a great option, especially because the Bills score so many points. So I really like him if he is still back. And honestly, another team might try to trade for him once Tyler Bass comes back, or they might just keep him on. Who knows? But he's a great kicker to have, making a lot of points for you, and a good kicker to look out for if you need one. And then, really quickly, guys, that you can drop right now are Steelers running back Caleb Johnson, Chicago Bears tight end Colston Loveland, Jaguars running back Tank Bigsby, Miami Dolphins running back Ollie Gordon, Vikings wide receiver Adam Thielen, Dallas running back Jaden Blue, Carolina Panthers wide receiver Xavier Legit, and tight end Evan Ingram of the Denver Broncos. All just really aren't playing very well, not really getting that many opportunities. Tank Bigsby going to Philadelphia doesn't really have a role at all. Caleb Johnson kind of messed up his opportunity with the Steelers. I don't know how much more he's going to be involved at the moment. And then tight end Colston Loveland just hasn't really been a factor for fantasy-wise. And everybody else, yeah, they're just non-factors right now. So, yeah, those are my waiver wire ads and drops. Thanks for tuning in.